here on the UCY.TV Broadcasting Network. My guests today are Crow from Crow 777 Radio and Jason Lindgren. So, gentlemen, let everybody know like where they can find your information, where they can, communicate with you, know more about what you guys are doing out there and have done, which I find really fascinating.
Okay, so primarily the best place to find us is on our private website on a private server, which is crow777radio.com. That's CRROW777radio.com. I also have a YouTube presence, which is Crow777. Again, 2 R's, but there may come a time in the not too distant future when we walk away from YouTube because of all the censorship. Mm-hmm. So really the best place to hit us up is on the private website.
Awesome.
And actually Jason has some contact places too.
Yeah, I'm easy to find as always. I'm, of course, the co-host with Crow on Crow 777 Radio. I have my own channel at Secrets of Saturn on YouTube that I may get back to doing some things on sooner or later. And if anyone wants to ever reach me, it's secretsofsaturn@gmail.com.
Nice. Okay, so this is, pre-recorded. This will air on this upcoming Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time on UCY.TV. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the website over there, but, check it out. And there's a lot of really, really good programming over there. It was live for a period of time until there were some issues, some personal issues and things like that things kind of went down for a while, but then now people are recording and uploading and things like that, so maybe eventually things are going to go live again, but that's when this will air. All right, so Crow, we were, prior to the call, you were talking about, and I was asking about the Shoot the Moon movie that you guys have, and that's what's the website for that? Shootthemoonmovie.com.
Well, basically, okay. If you go to crow777radio.com, there's a link to Shoot the Moon in the top navigation for anyone, whether you're a member or not. But it's being hosted for a 1-week rental on Vimeo on demand. At this point, search engines have kind of caught up. So if you put Shoot the Moon in Vimeo or Shoot the Moon in Crow 777 or Shoot the Moon in Jason Lindgren, a search return will get you there. And recently, a while ago, Jason submitted it. And by the way, Jason made the film, which is based on, I don't know, probably over 4 years of my telescopic work, among other things. Where was I going? Shoot, I lost my thread.
What the film is about, and it's available on Vimeo on demand, and we've been submitting it to film festivals.
Oh, there it is.
That's right.
Yeah, so Jason submitted to, 20-some film festivals. We were getting turned down immediately by a few, but now we've been accepted in a couple of places. So hopefully it will get out and be an alternative for people to consider. There's a lot of common sense ideas backed up by years of telescopic observation, among other things.
Nice. So as far as, what was it that initially got you in the process of looking at the moon and how did it all begin? I mean, I know you guys don't have to give the super details about it. Obviously, at some point within the next 24 hours, 48 hours, I'm gonna get on there and watch it. So what was it that kind of triggered you to start doing this?
Well, I got out of the Marine Corps in the early 90s, and I'd wanted a telescope my whole life, but couldn't afford one. And so by the time the mid 90s had rolled around, I'd been out of the Marine Corps for a while and I was working. I decided to go in debt for a fully robotic 8-inch Schmidt cast grain Meade telescope. It was more money than I'd spent on anything in my entire life other than a car. And that's when I started. But all the way back then, I was trying to learn everything NASA was saying was true. Subscribing to Astronomy Magazine, trying to learn all that. And I began to realize that there were problems with it. And then fast forward to 2012, there was a supermoon in May, and I had not had my scope out in a while, and we busted it out so family members could come see the supermoon. And my nephew spotted black triangles transiting the moon. And then each of us over 3 hours saw the black triangles. So that's what started it. I got filming coupling devices. I had a Canon T2i, so I got the things I needed to couple the DSLR to the back of my telescope. So the scope became the lens of the camera. And I started filming. So that was in May, and by the time mid-September had rolled around, I accidentally filmed the first known lunar wave in September of 2012. I held on to that footage for about a year. I never really wanted, I was a webmaster almost since the beginning of the web, and I did not want to have anything to do with social media. I knew what it was from the get-go, but in 2013, in the fall, a year later, I posted the lunar wave, and it took very little time before all hell broke loose. And as a matter of fact, about a month after the posting of the 2012 wave, the flat Earth, movement kicked up into high speed, or became very evident. Maybe that's a better way to say it.
Right. Yeah, I remember the day that I was talking with my friend Greg, a guy who used to work on Wall Street, who had some, inside things. And I used to be on Oracle Broadcasting.com and for probably about a year and a half. And then over to UCY after Oracle after they shut it down. I'm kind of wondering, it's still up in the air exactly what happened. They came out of the same, Oracle came out of the same area as Mr. AJ, Alex Jones. And so some people think that he was behind like the purchasing, or, hey, here's some money. And then so Oracle kind of, but anyway, Greg was telling me then, he was like, you need to look at some of these videos. You need to look at some of these guys that are saying that, where we think we are, we're not. And so it took me a little while to kind of to look at them. But it is a very hot topic, and it triggers many, many people. So did you have doubts about NASA prior to, this, your interest in, with buying this telescope, or did your spider sense start to tingle after you started seeing things that, the wave and the triangles and things like that?
It was a number of things. Most of the way through the 90s, I was learning what books and NASA and magazines would tell me. And as time went on, I kept finding issues that didn't jive. And at first, I thought, well, it's me. I just don't know enough. But then I remember around the time I got the telescope, the comet Hale-Bopp had come. And that was one thing that really kind of shifted everything for me, because I'd been so excited. Now I've got this pretty big telescope. I can go look at a comet, and it was the most damn disappointing thing you ever saw. As a matter of fact, much better view of most comets with a pair of binoculars or your naked eyes. You look at them through a telescope, and it's like, really? Not much there to see for the most part. And, that's not true of all of them, but that's when I really started to think about things. And then when I got into astrophotography back in the film days, I was using an Olympus 35 millimeter camera with film, and I started filming things like the Orion Nebula, and I began to realize what I'm able to create is in the ballpark, but nowhere near, not the same as what I'm seeing from the supposed Hubble. So that's where it all started. And then as we got up into the 2000s, it's just one thing after another.
Right.
Whether it was 9/11, Y2K, you just start to realize that the world is basically driven by nonsense.
Right. And I know you guys did the years, the decades, and I thought that was fascinating too, because I want to say I'm probably around your ages, from some of the conversations, some of the things that you've said about the things that you've experienced and the times that you have. So I figured that we're pretty much in the same age group. And
yeah, I was born in the early 60s, and Jason is 10 years younger than me, almost exactly.
Okay. All right, cool. Yeah, so you guys are basically in that group. So and I was saying, as I was saying to Wayne when I was having a conversation with Wayne, that when you get to 30 years of age, you either start to put pieces together, you start saying, something's not right, or you start to get political, whereas you never were political before. You start to care about things that you never really cared about before. That's why I really question this deep-seated hatred of the current king of the United States corporation. I start to question this hatred because I didn't even get political at all until I was my late 20s, early 30s, where I started saying, well, maybe I should start to vote or something. So if you could point out one of the things that was like the most bizarre to you, that and I can assume, I want to go ahead and assume that what they were talking about, this the Hale-Bopp, you were saying, the
Hale-Bopp,
yeah, that they, of course, NASA and all of these other government organizations were building it up to be like something, and then when you looked at it, you were like really?
They do that all the time. Every time a decent comet comes, they bill it as the comet of the century. Well, as a matter of fact, it was, if I really had to go back in time and put a dividing line, when I was already suspicious, I already didn't accept so many things, but for as far as the sky clock is concerned, the comet Ison was the one that when I just realized this is all nonsense. This is all misdescribed nonsense. The comet Ison wasn't there. It was a figment of everyone's imagination. And the problem with that is people are going to go out and say, oh, no, it's not. I saw pictures of it. And I'm going to tell you flat out that here's how I know. I was waiting for it. It was supposed to be coming by Mars. People were making all these clips saying, oh my God, this comet's going to cause electrical storms on Mars, and I wasn't sure what to make of it, but I started trying to film it. And there was one other guy, I forget his name, he had a big scope, and he was like posting all these big pictures. First thing I noticed was comets turned green around the time comet Ison came. In the history of every memorable comet of the 20th century, which I could recognize from having done all the studying, they're white, they're blue. Occasionally there might be a whisper of yellow. But all of a sudden in the 2000s, comets turn green. And so this guy's posting all these beautiful images of Ison, and I said, okay, I'm going to go out and shoot it. And I can't find the damn thing. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm a little rusty. I've gotten back up to speed. I'm getting talented, using the scope again. So I'm just going to do this. Could not find it. So it's supposed to be approaching visual magnitude where you can detect it without a a telescope, which, by the way, it never does. And by the way, before that, they're telling you this is going to be the comet of the century. So this is what I do. It was in the eastern sky in San Diego early in the morning. So I was getting up at like 4:30, 5 in the morning when it was still pretty dark. And I said, I'm going to find this. And so finally, the star Regulus in Leo the Lion, which is so bright you can't miss it, and the planet, the so-called planet Mars, was right there. So there was no, there was no missing where the comet's supposed to be. And I did this. I took my camera, I put a wide field shot on it so that I had Regulus and Mars and everything in that area in frame, and I opened the shutter for 5 minutes. And it wasn't there. And I did any number of things to do this. And meanwhile, these other people are posting pictures of ISON. And I just started to realize all of this is a tale. It is a media idea.
Right.
And so
for all of the research that you did and the effort that you put into it, and how expensive was this telescope that you purchased?
Well, that's kind of a story too. I wanted a scope. I had not made the decision. I was like in one of these, I was in a mall with my wife in San Diego, and it's like one of these Discovery store shops, like not a place you would buy a telescope.
Right.
But I noticed there was a big robotic 8-inch, and the story behind it was an older lady bought it for her husband, and she bought everything, the carrying case, all the extras, eyepieces, all this stuff, brought it home, and the husband said, this is too much. And so she brought it back. So here it was, opened, never used, and cheaper. So I think at the time it was roughly $2,600 that I went in debt.
Okay.
Something like that. But it was, among the earlier fully robotic scopes, automatic tracking, all these types of things, good optics.
Now, is there anyone else at that time? I mean, you're looking at this saying, I'm going to check this out because I know this is happening, and other people have posted things online. Was there anyone else like saying the same thing that you were saying, or anyone else out there describing what what your experience was?
For the most part, there was one guy that I remember who had very big telescopes. I don't remember his name, and he was very mainstream. NASA tells the truth. And he's posting all these crisp images of ISON. And so, the first thing I'm thinking, well, maybe this guy has a 14-inch scope and he's in Argentina where the skies are pitch black. I'm doing all this mental gymnastics trying to figure out. And then I start to realize it's not true. They're saying it's right below visual magnitude, and I'm opening a camera lens, and you can't detect it. I did this again later with a different comet. I forget the name of it, but it was a green smudge. I could locate it, but it was a green smudge, and that's, I started making clips. Not too many people were. Actually, I was among the first people that I'm aware of that used a telescope and high definition footage to challenge what NASA had been saying all these years. But at the time, I kept saying, why the hell are comets green now? Comets were never green. Now they're green. All kinds of things like this. And then, ISON was just the kicker.
What was your take on that? Like, why the change of color?
It's fraud. Exactly how it's fraud, I'm not sure, or why it's fraud. I know partially, like ISON, all these commercials on TVs were saying things like, this is on. So it's basically ISON put into the advertisement for a car company or a massive rugby tournament somewhere. They kept putting everywhere, something is on. So, it was a mind screw, basically. It's the people who know better laughing with their mega multinational corporations encoding the lie that people are buying into the world. And you got to realize that historically, there's nothing good about comets. historically. They were always the harbingers of negative ideas, death, sickness, any number of things. And, that culminated some years later when NASA had the balls to tell us all they landed on a comet with the Rosetta Philae mission. That's a clip that I still have up. And I pulled that thing apart to the point where if you're an adult human being and there is any logic in your mind, you will fully understand the nonsense that we're presented with.
Wow. So, and what color are they normally and have been up until that point?
White. Sometimes you get shades of blue. You can go, I haven't done a search in a while, but there's comets that anyone who is paying attention to the sky clock and seeing all the work that's been done for the past couple centuries, like Hayataki. There's another one I've forgotten. It's like an Alaskan type name, but there's any number of them. I can't recall their names now, but I would estimate there's a good 10 to 15 well-known comets that pretty much have a look. For the most part, sometimes it's claimed they go around the sun, which they don't. Which was the case with Ison. Guess what? It went into the sun and it blew up and came apart, and they're presenting you all these faked images of their supposed satellites that are all the way around the sun, 93 million miles. So it's all stagecraft, all of it.
Yeah. And so it was one of those things. We need to investigate this. Give us some more money. Give us some more money so we can investigate this.
You got to wonder where that. If you logically work out what so-called NASA does, well, they're not going to space, and that's demonstrable. Not in the way that they're showing us, anyhow. In my point of view, no one's leaving our atmosphere or has. But my point here is, people post all the time what NASA's daily budget is now, and it's a crap load of money. So you've got to imagine, and I think we can demonstrate that organization has contributed to technology that's in the world now, and maybe it makes a lot of tech we never see. But I'll tell you one thing, it sure as hell is not going to the moon. There is no Hubble Space Telescope. It goes on and on. Almost every image you've ever seen that's attributed to the Hubble could be made easily within the digital age by a ground-based scope, but there's an aircraft called Sophia, which, ironically enough, has the identical size and supposed camera as is claimed to be on the Hubble. So we've done clips on that. I've done work on that to show that almost certainly Sophia is the source of all that imagery. And of course, in the digital age, versions of Photoshop or whatever you want to use, almost every image you see of something from what they call deep space has been digitally manipulated.
And that
was tell them about the balloons with the satellites hanging from them. That's always fun.
Right. And so, that was a funny thing too. I think it was.
And you saw this with the telescope?
Well, the movie Shoot the Moon has an endless litany of black objects transiting the moon. They're black because they're backlit by the moon. And they may well be what satellites truly are, some kind of a balloon-like system supporting them. Hard to know, but it wasn't, I don't remember the year, but someone down in South America found a crashed satellite and filmed it and put it up on YouTube. That footage didn't stay up for that long, but it was a satellite laying there with a big balloon tied to it that had crashed. And not only that, there's other clips that we've seen that show a similar thing.
And roughly how big was it from what you could see while it was
up? Well, that's another thing. It's not that big. The balloon and the rope system were clearly bigger than like the machine portion of it, but that's another thing. If you want to accept that space is real in the way it's described, which I do not, ask a simple question. Where does space start? Go ahead and try to get a solid definition of where space starts. Most people give up and they say, I'll just accept the idea of the Kármán line. The Kármán line's 60 kilometers. So that's the claim where space starts. So think about, even if a satellite was the size of a car, could you film that thing if it was over 200 miles away from you? Would it be bigger than a pixel or detectable at all? That's part of the reasoning. Then I did all this optics work with optics experts to figure out with my system what the precise value of a pixel at 100 miles, at 11,000 miles, at the distance the moon is claimed. And we began to realize we could demonstrate convincingly that everything I ever filmed was in our atmosphere. And so there's a good chance that many of those things are serving the function of what is called a satellite.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So, there's many different things that, that you hear coming out of this, I want to call it the Earth Earth-shaped revisionist movement, because it just kind of triggers so many people, because it's so embedded in their belief system. Okay. Now, I'm not saying either way, but I know from seeing, experiencing and, getting, and I hate to say too close to the rabbit hole and falling in, but there are things that are going on out there that cannot be explained.
I'll say it for you, man. Yeah. The Earth is misdescribed, provably so. And it just comes down to whether you're going to be a person that's afraid to challenge what's written in a textbook or offered by some guy in a white lab coat. It's really that simple. And as a matter of fact, right now we're at the 50th anniversary of the faked Apollo missions. So television is rife with Apollo this, Apollo that. And
movie coming out. Right?
I recorded some of it the other night to see if they're sticking new footage in that we've never seen. And at this point, the footage is so faked, it's not even hard to determine that it's fake. But one of the things I noticed was Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America back in those days, newsman, comes on after the faked Apollo 11 landing, when Neil Armstrong fakes walking on the moon. And they say, guess what? The Flat Earth Society in London is now having to rethink what it's been saying all these years. Think about it. Think about the reason for even rebroadcasting that thing that was all those years ago in the 60s, and then think about the fact that there was an active Flat Earth Society in London. Then think about the fact that the roots of that go back at least 200 years. Then think about the fact that even movies like Men in Black, the first one, make fun when Will Smith is being recruited in. Tommy Lee Jones sits on a park bench and tells him 500 years ago the smartest men in the world knew the earth was flat. And he says something like, what will you know tomorrow? But when you get above the nonsensical grip of false media, your mind changes over time, and you get to a point where you can recognize the nonsense instantly. But I would tell people, go look at some of the Apollo stuff they're putting on now to convince the new young generation and reinforce with the older people that, yeah, man, we went to the moon. Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, and those stupid flat earth people had to recant because we showed them fake footage of a guy walking on a place you can't walk on. These types of ideas,
Well, you know what it is? I think it's like these things are wondrous. And they're delivered in such a way that they are wondrous, and they make you wonder, and they take you, this information. It takes you to a place that has just got to be real. It's just got to be real. So anyone who says the opposite, or anyone who says anything against it has got to be, someone that is fill in the blank. Count the ways.
Those days are going away, man. Lots of people have grown up enough that they're not afraid to challenge information. And another thing is, in China, with their surveillance state, they define mental illness as anyone who goes against the government. We see the same argument being formed out in the U.S. around gun control. This idea of this big problem that there are so many mentally ill people, and those are desperate measures. That tees up to say anyone who challenges the government narrative or the university narrative is mentally ill. And those are desperate measures to try to scare people into not standing up for what's correct. But by the way, Jason just sent you a link through Skype of an example of a satellite strung from a balloon posted on YouTube.
All right. And so...
pretty quality footage, too.
All right. And so, listening to some of these things that the Earth-shaped revisionists are talking about, they're saying, like, whatever goes up, must come down. This whole thing. One second, I'm sorry. I'll just kind of view it as I'm talking to you guys. And so there is and this thing just kind of goes. If you go back to this 1959 Arctic Treaty, and I believe that there were still like Cold War animosities and things that were going on around that time.
Also manufactured.
Everybody just decided that, hey, we're just gonna. Oh wow, look at that! Nice.
Chances are you're actually looking at a real satellite. In our atmosphere, not in some imaginary space.
Right. So that so the Arctic Treaty, and that was one of the things that kind of got me. It's like they're just deciding that this portion of land, this land mass is off limits. Nobody's allowed to go there.
Well, actually, Jason knows quite a bit about this, but if you go back to the earliest footage we have, what's the name, Jason? What's the name of the naval thing? Do you recall the two films we have with the JATO jetpacks and all that nonsense?
No.
Anyhow, they're black and whites. It's supposed to be one of the first expeditions down there. And they claim openly in this film that they still rebroadcast on Turner Classic Movies and places like that there is more land beyond the coast of Antarctica than both the United States and Canada combined, and that it is so rich with natural resources as to be unbelievable. Has anyone ever seen images of this?
Oh, you're referring to the Admiral Byrd stuff when he was on TV doing the interviews. Yeah, that's what you're referring to.
Well, there's two films. I want to say High Jump, but I don't think that's right.
No, that's something else. But what you're referring to, there are several interviews that are actually easily available on YouTube where he's giving in detail what's supposed to be down there. And then, of course, you never hear another peep about it afterward because all the Arctic treaties come in and all that stuff.
Right. There's two black and white films. I think both of them are over an hour that show supposed footage, and they do their drama where a plane goes down and they got to rescue dudes. They do all the typical mind hook things, but it doesn't take a genius to understand that we're in the 21st century. There should be no portion of this world that we're not completely familiar with, can look up images, can look at in real time anytime we want, and yet Antarctica is not that. The only people who get to go there is Anthony Bourdain with his film crew to tell you some nonsense about that place. But the point I would make here is even just a cursory investigation will inform you that something like 52 nations guard the border. So why are they guarding the border of a place that's so damn desolate no one would really want to go anyhow? And beyond that, just look at the names of the place. Almost everything down there is named after some royal person.
Yeah.
It's all a charade. But it's an important charade because it's key to understanding a better description of this place we call Earth.
Yeah, that would be like one of the most fascinating things in my as I contemplate the possibilities. And I think that's the problem, where people don't want to contemplate the possibilities. They've been given a limited, they've been given a limited and limiting, like a dog that has an invisible fence. And so they just kind of believe everything because it's safe. It's safe to believe things. And I'm not saying that there's more land, but if I was a psycho and I was, a group of people that thought that I was better than everyone else, and we know that they exist in this world, if there was more land somewhere, if it was me, I'd be like, yeah, I want that piece of land over there, that, 3 or 4 acres in this, wherever this is. And we know that most of these, you got the Dutch islands, you've got the British islands. Every bit of land is owned by royalty. It's owned by royalty. And I know you guys had Clint Richardson on there, and he, I don't know how much you were aware of the information, the things that he's researched over the years.
Jason knows all that front and back.
Right. And so it only makes sense that, everything that we've ever been told. The education system is just, it's just there to create this. It just, the globe on the, not to go too deep into it, trigger warning. The globe, in kindergarten on the, here, this is you. You are here, and it just has a way of, embedding itself into your belief structure. And once that belief structure is created and it builds, once it's in there, it's kind of like Jenga, if you will. Every single, you start with, the full tower, and every belief, everything that you allow yourself to believe, one block comes out. And then when the tower falls, it's like, I'm sure you guys have played it before. So,
here's the thing. These companies and the governments act like that we have limitless resources, and this is something I've been suspicious of for ages. Yeah. And I think most people could agree with that. They just keep pounding out products and ripping this apart and chopping down trees or whatever it happens to be. But this is what makes me highly suspicious, that there may be more to land, the world, resources than we're told. And just to be very specific, we mentioned Operation High Jump. That was part of what Admiral Byrd did, and it was, the primary mission was to establish the Antarctic research base called Little America 4. So that's cute.
4?
Little America 4. Yep, and this is from 46-47.
I know where the first one is. Where are the other two?
Right, and then of course we have the Antarctic Treaty, which is collectively known as the Antarctic Treaty System, and that's most of there were originally 12 countries, and then it built up over the years. And go ahead and try and go there and go off the little paths they allow you to and see what happens. You're not going to get anywhere. Not to mention the fact it's so inhospitable that you're not going to get anywhere, even if you could get away from whoever is watching.
The stormtroopers.
So they claim, but Jason, we should lay out the whole Mercator thing. He's talking about lands. He's just talking about lands that nobody knows about, and I think that's absolutely logically feasible. We all went to school, and on the map, on the wall of every school, there's a map. It's called a Mercator projection map. But as soon as you start to scrutinize these things, you begin to realize that they're all wrong. If you take a Mercator projection, go online, look up Mercator, look up Gall Peters, look up Peters. You could just look up projections of maps, put them all next to each other, and every one of them is different. So if every one of them is different, then how do you point to one like the one on the high school wall and say this one's correct? The truth of it is, the moment that we supposedly went to space and looked back at the world and took a picture, that problem went away. Because now you could accurately depict the continent as it would look from a couple hundred miles up. But they keep trying to tell you, well, it's a globe and we had to flatten. No, nonsense. If you can get an image from 200 miles up, then that's how you depict a continent. When you get down closer into the map, then it's like a street map. It doesn't matter anymore. You're showing little, finite parts of it. But when you start to understand that, then you realize if the world is misdescribed and if it is possible that I don't even know certainly the shape of the continent I'm standing on, then how can I deny that it is likely there are land masses I know nothing about? And Antarctic is the perfect example. Does that land go on infinitely till the end of whatever? Or is there more land there than we know about and the rest? Who the hell knows? Nobody can go there. There's no images of it. And so when the logical mind gets going on these things, there's no going back.
Right. Yeah. And it always kind of reminds me, like when people talk about, where you fall off if you travel too far. Is there like a drop-off point? And I always think about the Kansas Point of No Return album cover.
Yeah, what you just described was instilled in the Bugs Bunny cartoons, by the way.
What would the
where you fall off the edge of the earth?
Okay.
That there's a classic Bugs Bunny where Bugs Bunny is arguing with Christopher Columbus, who is also a construct, by the way. And Christopher Columbus is saying she's a round like a tomato, and Bugs Bunny is saying she's a flat like a pizza. And by the way,
I think I remember that now.
The pizza is always used, even in modern times, because some of the biggest corporations own those pizza chains. The pizza is still allegory for the flat world. Whatever shape or whatever size it may be. But anyhow, that idea that you just expressed, the ship going over the edge, there's a famous painting that instilled it in everyone, but for my money, the generation that I'm part of was influenced early on as children by Bugs Bunny. That came up a few times.
Wow. And even the thinking about the lyrics too, that song "Point of No Return." What a great band they were. So such an incredible. And I think maybe even they were hinting at something, possibly, maybe.
Well, there is no popular music that mattered that isn't encoding and suggesting, and it's the nature of that whole industry. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about music, film, TV. It's everywhere.
Gotcha. So I figured that the Shoot the Moon would be one of the really best places to start with you guys, because it is it's your creation together. Again, I can't believe I haven't watched it yet, but I will be watching it, and I'll definitely reach out with my thoughts and everything on it. So. You guys, if there's anything else you want to kind of cover on that, just let me know. I listened to so many of your podcasts. One of them was you guys spoke about Mercury, and I thought that was just fascinating. The Mercury topic, and then you spoke about Robert Johnson. And I tried to explain it without going back and listening to the podcast again, because I'm out there and I'm walking and I'm trying to choose between like so many of these incredible podcasts that you guys have done. And Robert Johnson,
Johnson is a good one for people of our generation, because they all grew up understanding Robert Johnson was the root to rock and roll. All blues, all Delta blues. There's your source, Robert Johnson. He went down to the crossroads, sold his soul to the devil. He made 29 songs, count the ways, but one of them's missing. There's your mind hook. Where is that missing song? Damn, we love this music. Where's that missing song? We only got 28. We need 29. It's proof positive when you logically work out what we've laid down about it. that Robert Johnson never existed as a human being, whether or not some person played the role, but that it is the use of mercury and mercurial ideas to encode the path of the sun in a way that makes people fearful, that instills mystery, that makes them worship things that don't exist, any number of things. And what would you add, Jason?
Well, we've actually talked about this, and we've looked at this a couple times. And have you noticed how the information has been shifting over the course of the 2 years we've been discussing it?
He's getting written out now, right?
Well, yeah, and you're completely correct. Robert Johnson, when I was 17, 18, starting to learn how to play guitar, was always considered, this is the root, this is where it came from.
Yep.
Now all of a sudden they're discussing other people, and there's still the same kind of story around Robert Johnson, but now all of a sudden it's not as important as it used to be. Now it's about some of these other people and things like that. So you got to wonder, what's the real root of rock and roll, and how did these things go from one to the other? But it definitely seems to have come from the black blues music of the 20s and the 30s, and then kind of worked the way forward. What's interesting is a lot of the bands that we discuss that are probably Tavistock projects in some way, shape, or form, if you look at their earliest works, what are they drawing from?
That's
Rolling
right.
Stones being the best example.
Good
They
point.
wanted to play all blues.
That's right. Good point, man.
And I started to have this conversation and say that, just kind of blathering, it's possible that, this Robert Johnson guy never really existed. And then I kind of caught a little
Or
bit
an
of
amalgamation is probably a more likely scenario.
right. And I think they kind of reinforced it with a movie that I thought was awesome for a number of different reasons. Because, I play guitar as well. I know you guys do too. And I'd be, if you guys have anything or any kind of work or anything that you want to share with me, I'd love to hear it.
Jason's got a ton. Jason's got albums.
Oh, wow, dude, I'd love to hear it if you want to send some links and things.
Sure, yeah, I'll send you some links.
And so, I kind of got derailed there.
I
Derailed
was
myself.
gonna say,
But yeah,
but
Crossroads with Ralph Macchio.
Exactly.
And then at the end, he has that duel with Steve Vai. It's like, ugh.
And they're going to find, the devil is the nonsense put in there, which is actually just the sun at its low point at the summer solstice, which is 12/21, which encodes 33. But the new guy that is being fabricated to be the root of Delta Blues appears to be a guy named Charlie Patton, and that will get all tied to slavery, by the way. But here's what the logical mind can do. So let me ask you a question. In your world, Andre, who knows you better than anyone else in the world? If someone was going to make, after you're dead, a biography about your life as accurately as they could, who knows you better than anyone?
I would say
Your wife or
my
a
current girl.
Okay,
and,
so that
and my, family. Some members of my family.
So all those people get together to make a film biography of your life. And they reconstruct that night in the kitchen when this thing happened. And they reconstruct that time you were at a baseball game and something else happened. How accurate is that portrayal from those people who knew you best? The overall idea of what they're trying to express may be valid in something that truly happened. But then again, when you get three people who knew you well, chances are there's three different versions of what happened that day. So when you get to the replacement of someone like Robert Johnson by another guy named Charlie Patton, you can logically work out that if it truly happened, if there truly was a person named Charlie, then there might be resemblance to reality. But other than that, it's a figment. It's a representation. It's a story. And you've got to logically work these things out. I haven't looked at it closely, but I will not be surprised if in the next year I say Charlie Patton is a figment of your imagination. There are a lot of people out there that want to argue with me about Robert Johnson, but I'm not really concerned with it. I've done my homework, and I worshipped Robert Johnson when I was a young guitar player. Oh my God, did he really sell his soul to the devil? Well, now I'm a damn grown-up.
Right.
No, he didn't. He's talking about watching the sun. I went down to the crossroads, baby. I looked east and west. Well, why? Because that's the path of the sun. And I fell down to my knees. Well, why? Because that's the symbol for Capricorn when the sun is at its low point at the winter solstice, what we call Christmas. And that is the allegory for the devil. And that is also the mercurial idea, which that symbol for Mercury holds the devil horned icon and the crossroad right in the symbol. It's all provably a construct. And you could say the same thing of Einstein. You could say the same thing of Stephen Hawking. But most of the time, people's heads just explode because you had the gall to challenge these heroes of history.
There's a big point on Johnson I really would love people to check out. And there is a lot of argument over this. But there are folks who have slowed down the recordings. Those, I think it's like a CD, 2 CDs-ish worth of recordings that are supposed to be attributed to Robert Johnson. And they always sounded funny to me. You know how like a lot of old films, they're sped up, and a lot of old recordings, they're not, you could tell, they're just not at the right speed. Well, some folks have taken a stab at pulling them down to what they thought it should be, and all of a sudden, it sounded right to me.
Right, legit.
Yeah, it's like, no, that sounds like a black man singing in the way you would expect his voice to sound. And the way I've heard really good blues players play, because it always sounded a little too fast, and it always sounded just a little too tinny off, you know? It's like, obviously the recording technology was terrible back then compared to today, but it wasn't so bad that things aren't intelligible. They should be intelligible in a normal way. And once you change the speed down, I don't know, that sounds like more what I would expect it to be. And he's not shredding like Eddie Van Halen all of a sudden when you do that. He just sounds like a really good blues player. And, of course, a lot of people who are Johnson worshipers are saying, no, that's ridiculous. He was, you know, whatever you want to say about him.
Is there footage of him? Is there? I know that somebody said
pictures, right?
Two pictures. Yeah, count them.
And they were press shots, or whatever you want to call them, like promo shots done for him.
Of him sitting in the chair, right? Of him sitting in the chair.
Yeah.
Okay.
One's like a close-up with a cigarette and everything. But there's just these recordings, and that's it. Now, we are talking about the 1930s, so there wouldn't have been a ton of stuff around the entertainment business in general unless you were Top of the Pops, you know? Those kinds of things just didn't exist yet. But there's so little of him. Now, there are some big blues guys who said that they knew him.
And they lied. And
those people have also all now passed on, because we were talking a long time ago now. But it seems like that he may have existed, but the things and the way they tie all the stuff to him just really seems like a fabrication.
So recently on it was like Roadshow or someone had found the unpublished picture of Robert Johnson, and it was going to be worth it's a fake. But let me just tell you something quickly about our world, and this is where a lot of people that are starting to grow up to the nonsense we exist in, they think that it's a bridge too far, but in fact, this is the way it's done, folks, whether you choose to accept it or not. In Robert Johnson's case, it's a complete 9/11 encode. And the reason it's a 9/11 encode is because it's such a vast lie, it's going to be used on a worldwide level to pull everyone's mind into fantasy. When everyone's mind is pulled into fantasy, it is very easy to control people who can't possibly make one right decision because everything they believe in is not true. Right. And here's some of the examples. He's born on May 8th, get this, 1911. There's your 9/11 code. But get this, it's a double 9/11 encode because he dies on August 16, 1938. 38 is 11, and the 16 is the Marty McFly method of encoding 9/11, where the 9 is inverted to a 6. But get this, he does all his work in 1936. 36 is a way to encode the number 666, because not only could you view it as saying 3 sixes, which is kind of an offhand way, but if you add every number from 1 to 36, the sum will be 666. So he's encoding 666. To top it off, his active years in every account is 1929. Anytime you see 92 or 29 used in this way, it's encoding 911 because 9 and 2 is 11. But then he dies in 38, which sums, and we only take the decade markers. Everyone knows the century. So you're looking at the 29 and the 38. 38's 11. 11 is Crowley's evilest of numbers, which is why it's used, partially why it's used in 9/11. You can go through these things and, the 29 songs, there's 9/11 encoded. Oh, one is missing. There's the mystery to hook people. This is all made up nonsense. And in one of the episodes, I take the Crossroad Blues and I break it down verbatim to demonstrate to people why we can prove that it's nonsense.
What episode is that?
Is Rose sitting next to you, Jason?
I mean, if you don't have it right now,
you can edit it in if you want. Give me 1 second, I could find out.
Sure.
Yeah, actually, give me a second. I remember it's got an icon on the episode with the Crossroads traffic sign.
I'm speaking with Crow 777 and Jason Lindgren. We're talking about a mishmash of things, and you're what you guys doing are just so much to just kind of touch on that just kind of, and it's always good because like in the years that I've done podcasts, I've always just kind of did things a certain way, maybe the easy way, to just kind of roll through some things, hand out some information, and then say there's something wrong with this. It doesn't seem right. When I say you guys are rock stars, I mean you guys really, really kind of break things down. You really do things in such a way that I appreciate it. Is what I'm saying.
I found the episode. It's episode 56 called Alchemy, Transmuting the World Mind into a Fantasy-Based Reality. And then 3 episodes before that, on episode 53, we apply the Mercury symbol, the Crossroads idea, to prove that nuclear weapons don't exist as you've been told they do. That's right. So the Robert Johnson breakdown is in episode 56 on Crow777radio.com, and episode 53 goes through the nuclear nonsense. It's titled Duck and Cover No More.
Rose also said it's mentioned in 158.
Okay, terrific.
Rose knows everything.
Very good. So, wow. So, I mean, this is the thing that people have, they have such a problem with on some level, because there's even, from what I've, some of the research that I've done and become aware of, is that there's even like a music frequency type of thing that took place that Rockefeller may have had something to do with. They call it like the 528, or what is it, 440? What is it, the 440A?
440 is considered current,
right?
From early 20th century forward. I think it's 1940s. I don't remember the exact year. This A standardized at 430 hertz. Now, before that, a lot of people use different tunings, and as a matter of fact, some people still do use different tunings, especially when you're doing classical pieces. 421 is a very common one for some of the older work, especially 1700s. But yeah, what you're referring to is the difference between 440 and 432. Right. 432 is much more in harmony with nature. So big surprise that some people with diabolical notions might want to skew that away to target the human brain in a negative way. As a matter of fact, all my music that's current anyway from the past 5-7 years or so, it's all done in 432.
Very nice.
And they have tools now. You can take your complete iPod or whatever digital device, and you can convert all that 440 music to 432 or something else. And while I from my point of view, I don't know if Jason agrees with this, that's certainly probably a little better, but it's not the same as having it recorded in 432 to start with, or some others.
That's correct, because it's the way the waveforms propagate.
Right.
So when you're building it up, it's very different than taking something that's already completed and then bumping it down.
Well, plus you've embedded your intention, whether you realize it or not, into the initial recording. Yeah, right. So there's all that to consider. But there are a number of other tunings. You know, before science got a hold of our world and grabbed it by the throat, there were all these other methods for tuning. A lot of them referred to as verde meaning green in the Latin-based language. And by the time the 30s came along, and there's this big push by the powers that be, and of course Nazis are included in this story, they make 2 or 3 runs to shift. And to me it seems like this is how they did it. They realized that anywhere a piano is sitting in a music hall or a recording studio, that whatever that piano is tuned to, most people are going to tune to that, because it's much easier to tune other instruments than to get a guy to come retune the piano, which typically takes about 2 hours if you do it right. And so they just basically made a run to make middle A on a piano go to 440. And that's how it was actually implemented. And you can hear the difference. Anyone can go online and look up endless clips that show the difference between 440 and 432. And if you have an ear for music, you will detect that 440 is much more excitable. And we always use the example, like if you took AC/DC's Back in Black and you tuned it to 432, it wouldn't have the same punch, excitement, and impact.
And the way that I think about it is, you take your fifth string A at 440, and if you were to tune that down, to 432, I mean, the string would just be like fluttering on the neck. I mean, it would lose a lot of it.
It's only 8 cycles a second.
Okay.
So the difference between those, and that goes to tell you how easy it is to skew systems in this world. It's 8 cycles a second. That's nothing, man. Compare, what we're basically saying is at 440, there's 440 vibrations per minute. That's what we're saying.
Right.
So all they did was jack it up 8 more vibrations per minute.
Okay.
Or I'm getting that wrong.
On the sine wave? On the
8 cycles per second. 432 is only slightly flat. Like if you listen to them both, it's only slightly different.
So it's per second.
So,
and this also relates to the manipulation of our world in other ways, like the idea of electricity. Currently, and words have meaning, we refer to electricity almost all the time in hertz. Well, what does hertz mean, right? If you hurt somebody, that's what hertz means. They're going to tell you it's a name, and people get lost on what they've been told about it. But nonetheless, if a word sounds like a word, there's a relationship. There just is. And not only is there a relationship, it is often used to hide ideas in. See, when I was young, they did not refer to electricity in that way. As a matter of fact, even as far back in the early 90s, when I was a roadie for a number of years in the 90s, the old electrician stagehands always referred to the power supplies in cycles. They never said this many hertz or that many hertz. They did 2 things. They identified the amps, because that'll tell you if it'll kill you or not, blow you out of your shoes. And the other one was cycles, 60 cycles. And this is far enough back that these old dudes that had been on tour with the Grateful Dead would be hooking up these massive power supplies for a stadium gig. And at that time, and I'm not even kidding, they would instruct us, you'd stand there with a 2x4. I'm not even making this up. And while the old roadie hooked up this massive power supply for a stage event, if he got stuck to the electrical connections, you were supposed to hit him with the 2x4 to get him off the electricity.
Wow.
So this was not that long ago, but it tells you what language has meaning.
Yes, for sure. And I took, when I was in high school, I had electronics. I built I did the whole Ohm's law thing. My teacher was an electrical engineer, so it wasn't uncommon for him to start up in the upper left-hand corner when he was trying to figure out what the capacitance that would be needed in a circuit. And I would just sit there and
so was he still saying cycles at that point, or was he talking hertz? I mean,
I would say he would say hertz because it came out of the books, and he was kind of trained in in the schools, So I want to say, there was time, and he could have said cycles at one point, but I want to say that he kind of stuck to the. I want to say he kind of stuck to the book because that's who Hank was.
The older books actually were more interested in informing you. You go back to the 30s, 40s, 50s, electricians in the day, they're using the word cycles. Cycles tells you something.
Yeah, he would say cycles per second too. So he would say that too.
Electricity is cycling so many times per second. By the time they start calling it hertz, and by the way, I think it's supposed to be the name of somebody or something. Right. I've forgotten how we got it, but basically the only thing it's informing you is that electricity can hurt you, I guess.
Right. Yeah. All right. So, wow. So what I wanted to do was one of the topics that, among many, is the sky clock and astrology, and this really kind of hits home with me because I have a family member, and I'll share this information with you guys off the air. They actually have a magazine. Sad thing is that at this point, my sister's husband is probably is not going to be with us much longer because we haven't figured out a way to stop, cancer and some of these other things.
That's another the Gerson method.
Yeah, I know you mentioned that quite a bit. So they, for a number of years, have a publication, and this book, this magazine, has so much in there that I could never even be able to, decipher. My sister probably once or twice did a chart on me. And so as I'm listening to, and I think you had Phoenix, and then you had another, the Mastering the Zodiac, which is another just like incredible website that
Athen Clemente.
Right. And so the sky clock and astrology. The Gregorian and how they changed, the
calendars, that'd be Julian and Gregorian.
Speak a little bit on that, because it seems like you guys are, no matter what you're talking about, somehow this sky clock and some of these other things just really kind of fall right into place with this.
Well, contrary to what people want to believe, and by the way, we don't use the word astrology because there's too much baggage tied to it. It's been made to look ridiculous by design. But the sky clock controls just about every facet of life here in this world, and it's provable. And that is why the powers that be set out to make things like astrology and alchemy silly. But the truth is any human being listening to me now that grows a garden understands that the sky clock governs what happens in that garden, not just when things sprout or bloom or bear fruit, but much more than that. Those plants are not doing at sunrise what they're doing at noon, these kinds of ideas. So all these systems, whether you're talking about Julian calendars or Gregorian, and by the way, the timekeepers of the world still track Julian for some reason, even though they've implemented Gregorian everywhere else, which a pope made up, by the way. So how helpful is that for most of us? My main point here is the simple rule of thumb is there's no lie in nature. And when we're talking about the sky clock, it's a perfect system, apparently, from our point of view, and it's part of nature. And this is not true of man-made systems, and the Gregorian or the Julian or any other damn division of time, you want to make up that isn't using the luminaries in the sky are not accurate all the way. As a matter of fact, we point out all the time, you're wearing a wristwatch or you're looking at your iPhone and it tells you it's noon, it's not noon. It's an approximation of noon. Noon is when the sun is at the highest point in its arc for the day, called solar noon. All these systems pull us away from nature, and people are at peak performance when they're in tune with what we call nature. And the predecessor of science, called alchemy, was in step with nature. So these are the things that modern technocracy tries to push far from us.
Wow, and the reason for daylight saving time and things like that is for a commerce-driven. Among other things, I know that there's more esoteric and things like that.
It jacks you. Yeah, it removes you from nature. It jacks you out of the cycle of time. The daylight savings time is a made-up nonsense. First of all, provably made-up nonsense. They're claiming they're going to save some daylight, get more daylight for that farmer. That's just complete hokum. You want more daylight, get up earlier. There's only so much light in a day. So if you want to jack a clock around and fake like you've changed something about the natural world, have at it. But it's a lie. As a matter of fact, there's an Indian chief who had a saying, only a white man would cut a foot off the bottom of a blanket, sew it to the top of a blanket, and act like he changed something. And that was in regard to daylight savings time, which is implemented, by the way, at the spring and fall equinox, which are supposed to be days of balance. We're supposed to have 2 days of balance in this world, which actually isn't all the way true on its own anyhow. But my point is they implement these things right at key times. And what it does is, like, if people are familiar with the idea of circadian rhythms or other things, it pulls you away from being in tune with your world. You got to think back 100 years. When was it time to get up? Well, when the rooster crowed or the sun was coming up, that was nature telling you, okay, it's time to start your day. How did you know when it's time to go to bed? Well, the sun's going down. We can't see anymore. So most of our work is now complete. That is a human being in tune with an apparently perfect system that we call nature. From the onset of chronology devices like clocks and wristwatches, we have steadily been pulled away from nature. By the way, although I don't accept the dates of history, I can put a date on it for you. We really started to get jacked out of time on what mainstream likes to call 1620, and I can tie it all day long to Easter, to the Vatican trying to act like Easter occurs on one day, which is also not true. Right. If you're in New York, Easter will not occur the same time for you as it does in Russia. But the Vatican wanted to force Easter to one day. And that was a complete put-up. Every culture since the beginning of time has understood when the equinox is. And since currently they want to set Easter as the first full moon after the spring equinox and then pull it to the nearest day of the sun, or right, Sunday, it's all a construct.
Wow. So you mentioned the circadian rhythm. Is that something that has kind of surfaced as a result of them changing things around? Because the things that I've heard about it is you get your best sleep between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. Is that...
I would imagine a modern human being doesn't even really mostly know what good rest and good work. And you look out in your garden, you see a squirrel or a chipmunk, they're miles ahead of you. They are in tune. They understand when spring's here with no one telling them. As a matter of fact, you know how I gauge when spring is now? I wait for the chipmunks to come out of hibernation. That's how I do it, because I know there's no lie there. The news is busy telling me, oh, today's the spring equinox, and it's not. It's probably not.
Is it sooner than what they say, or is it later than what they say, or does it vary?
So it will be... I got to think about this for a second. In the spring, at the vernal equinox in March, they will announce, usually on the 21st or 22nd, sometimes the 20th, that it's the equinox everywhere in the world, which is a lie. sunrise does not occur in New York when it does in California, and the same thing applies to an equinox. An equinox is supposed to be equal night and day, so in the spring it will occur roughly 3 days prior. So this year, I think it was on the 19th when equal day and night occurred. And when you get over to the fall in September, I think it's 4 or 5 days off, and they announce it too early, which again, they've tried to force it to the 21st or 2nd, occasionally the 20th.
Right.
You can look at these times, but why would you bother to lie about a thing like that? That's the division of the seasons. And it's no different than time zones, as a matter of fact. Like in the United States, the central time zone, I think it's central. One of them's really, really has some wide spots, like almost 800 miles, getting close to 1,000 miles. So in that time zone, a dude on the western border is going to see noon at the same time as the dude on the eastern border of the time zone. And there's 800 miles in between them. They will not witness sunrise and sunset at the same time, which proves they will not experience noon at the same time or any other damn time of the day. This is the artificial reworking of our world for commerce and for control. Yeah. That's what all these systems do, and we act like it's normal. But I'm here to tell you that all these things need to be rethought. This is not normal. What the squirrel and the chipmunk are doing, that's normal.
Wow. Well said. Now, one of the, I'm sure I listened to a little bit of this one, and I noticed something, and I'll explain what I experienced was I just kind of switched over. I got a newer vehicle, but this older vehicle that I had, at the top of the windshield, it had a tint. Okay, the new one doesn't. But with the tint and with sunglasses on, I would be able to view the sun to a certain extent. And I happened to notice that there was something at 4 o'clock of the sun, depending. And it looked like it was another round object. And I thought to myself...
High or low? Was it at the lower limb of the sun or the upper limb?
I want to say it was like, when I saw it, it was always like, I want to say to the right side of it.
And up or equal?
It's hard to say. That's why I say it's like around 4 o'clock in that area. And then, of course, my mind kind of goes into like, is there another object there that we can't see? And
yes.
There you go. And so, and I noticed that with the geoengineering, the chemtrail dispersion of what they do, you kind of understand the timing, and sometimes there won't be any spraying all day, and then they'll spray later in the day, and I wonder, like, what are they hiding? What is? Are they hiding something? And then, and it just, I had Alana Freeland. Are you familiar with her?
I'm not sure.
Under an Ionized Sky. She wrote Under an Ionized Sky.
I don't think so, but I could be mistaken. So many people, hard to keep track of.
Yeah. I mean, she just did. She's an author of 2 books. One of them, Under an Ionized Sky, is talking about space vents and things like that. She did a conference in New Mexico with a man by the name of Clifford Carnicom.
It doesn't ring a bell.
If you Carnicom, CARNICOM. If you just type in Clifford Carnicom, it'll take you to his institute, the Carnicom Institute, and for the last 20 years, he's been taking samples and things like that of chemtrails and things like that, and so I was aware of him. I was familiar with what he was doing. I knew of him, so I was on a mailing list, and they just had a conference where they both kind of spoke, and they were the only 2 speakers there, but that's all they really needed because they're both pretty really locked in on this, and Cornicom saying like, I need, because he sent samples to places and they will not even like tell him, they won't take it and do anything with it. He's just been just completely, he says there's like DNA and a bunch of other stuff in there. Anyway, so speaking with her, and she's got this whole thing about the space vents, that there's this kind of like a kind of an electronic dome, kind of like what, I don't know if you guys are familiar. Well, I watch a lot of these different like Avengers type movies and things like that, the Marvel type stuff. And in there, Stark says that he mentioned something like putting a dome to protect them, but nobody wanted to do that because, you know, it would inflict upon our freedoms. And then he looked over at Captain America and all these other people. And so it was pretty fascinating Wayne was familiar with them because obviously because of what the research and the books that he's written. So with the sun, you said there's something there. So were my eyes deceiving me, or
no? It's been. I mean, even during eclipses, it gets filmed a lot by people who overexpose, and most people listening can understand. And by the way, chemtrails is not an arguable point. It's been admitted. Back in the days when I was trying to tell people this was going on and no one would listen and everyone said I was high, it's now admitted by the powers that be that geoengineering is going on. But if you notice, almost everywhere where there's any population center, sunrise will be smudged out of the sky by plane spraying, and sunset almost every day. Where I am, it's damn near every day. There's so few exceptions that I feel fortunate when I realize that I'm going to be able to see it go all the way down to set. And there's a few things this means. It's blocking a ton of sunlight, and sunlight is critical. Sunlight can be directly tied, from my point of view, to the worldwide awakening that started near the millennium, near the year 2000. Mm-hmm. But it's also when people sun gaze. And sun gazing is not hokum. I've done it myself. Right. It's a real thing. And to block the sun at 45 minutes, where it would be 45 minutes later at rise or before set, is to block a lot of people's ability to sun gaze. And more than that, there is, what I predict will be found is there is an object that can be filmed in visual spectrum. I have filmed what we call the second sun in hydrogen alpha, and we don't know 100% whether second sun is a good description. Is it another object outside of the hard fast barrier, the firmament? Is it a reflection off that barrier? We don't know certainly, but I have read enough very old texts and alchemical texts to understand that they took it as perfectly understandably true that there is a sun we do not see. There are two suns, and the one we do not see may well be the source for the one we do see. These are some of those old ideas. The problem is when you talk to someone who's just taken everything they know from school and NASA and all these other places, they're afraid to ask the important questions. But we kind of exist in an age now where a lot of people are not as afraid as they once were, and they have no problems with realizing an adult human challenges everything. I mean, do you want to believe in things, or do you want to know about things? It's that simple.
Right. And was it? I want to say it may have been on one of your podcasts. I'm not sure, but someone said, "Do you want authority to be your truth, or do you want truth to be your authority?" Was that? I want to say I heard it somewhere, and I would just think it had to be on the Crow podcast. But and
it's a nice phrase.
Yeah,
nice phrase. I don't recall it.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where it was. But yeah, do you want authority to be your truth, or do you want truth to be your authority? So is this where this whole Nibiru thing kind of started coming out of this the sun that's going to and again I don't believe it, but I think you know what I think anything's possible. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna play into any of the fear, because they say this what do they call it, a dwarf star or something. But I mean, a buddy of mine believes it. He's kind of very, very religious. He's a really, really good guy. So we have conversations, and he's like, well, Nibiru is coming next year. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll try to prepare.
Yeah, I'll take that bet all day. Year. Yeah, I'll take that bet all day. Right. It's nonsense. If I'm not mistaken, Jason, isn't Sitchin one of the guys who helped bolster the modern idea?
Oh, yeah.
But it goes back before him. When they're trying to prove their orbital mechanics and their gravity nonsense, and gravity is just a theory based on a theory. For anyone who wants to be honest about it, it's not a law, and theories are not anything that we accept as important beyond belief. They're theories, they're ideas. Laws are the things that matter, that cannot be questioned, that you can try to poke holes in all day long, and you can't, because it's a law. But my point here is there was back a time when they couldn't figure out this orbit, and there must be a hidden planet. That's where these ideas come from, and they're completely nonsense. Space is misdescribed. Our world is misdescribed. The sun and moon. As a matter of fact, the Apollo thing, I was just watching when they showed the paper excerpt that these poor idiots that are flat earthers in England now have to rethink everything because Neil Armstrong is walking on the moon showing fake pictures of the Earth rise over the moon, which, by the way, those pictures have been proven fake. Jason did it, I did it, and NASA has since replaced those images because you could find the crop marks where they put the snapshot of Earth and their mocked-up moon. But my point here is that all these things that have a mystery to them, that are fear porn, it's going to destroy the world, end of the world is near. Anyone who continually buys into these things has not yet grown up into their adult mind. The adult mind should firstly say, wait a minute, does common sense allow me to consider this in any meaningful way? And if the answer to that is no, you can still consider it, but it has failed the primary test. And you should never accept anything that has failed the primary test. Right. Now, you can continue on and do all these things, but as you begin to relate the idea of Nibiru to any of the other things we see in the world, you'll start to notice the commonality, the fear porn, the mind hook, that mystery. It's like Robert Johnson's missing 29th song. There always has to be that mystery that snags the lazy human mind. You see, because mystery is a thing that hooks your mind and it never resolves. And as an example of that, Roswell's a perfect example. The whole Roswell lie, right off the 33rd parallel of this country. Every year, more new secrets about Roswell are published in books. And there is never a year when you are an inch closer to resolution. Ever. And there never will be. And these are fingerprints of fraud. These are key indicators for an adult human mind to say, wait a minute, this is not right. Things that exist in the world, you can know things about them. When a new style of truck comes out, you don't have to argue whether it came out. You can say it comes in these colors, it has this size engine, this many doors. You can know things about things that truly exist. That's some common sense logic. So people just have to get away from believing in things, and that's not a shot at religion. I mean information. Don't believe in information until you've challenged it.
So just recently, I saw a documentary on Netflix with this guy, Bob Lazar. And he, okay, so, and this is the thing.
We're about to talk about this yesterday.
And this is the thing. This is the thing here, that I truly believe that there's levels of compartmentalization everywhere in every single one of these governmental organizations, to the point where they can actually make people believe that work for them that things exist. So not only is Bob Lazar making this documentary with the help of this other guy, but he's also on Joe Rogan. He's talking about this.
That tells you everything you need to know.
There you go. So I there was a time when I thought that, it's possible. Like, if we're here, there's got to be something else different somewhere else, And
I'm kind of, what do you mean by that?
What we are, and of course we don't know what we are. We only, to a great extent, we know what we are because we've listened to this authority that's told us what we are, and which they've lied to us about everything. And so, again, if you question any of this, it falls under that. Everybody knows that. This, right? Like you said about the lie, that you tell a lie and you spread it across the globe, and it's so huge that people will pull that in. And when that lie gets, oscillates every year, or however much they want you to hear this again, it gets to the point where, well, everybody knows that this. So, do I believe that there are there's life forms outside of this? I'm beginning to question. I'm beginning to question big time.
You should tune in next Thursday, because we will be covering the alien nonsense that's been handed us through books and TV and movies, and Bob Lazar will be a piece of that. And an adult mind that looks at Bob Lazar or any of these things and walks away, you know what it comes down to? It comes down to the little poke in the eye you get at the beginning of the X-Files. Do you want to believe? That says it all. Because if you do want to believe, their work is already done. You're going to absorb all the nonsense. You're going to love the mystery. You're going to seek the mystery. You're going to want aliens to be true. And that's all it takes.
Yes.
But if you don't want to believe, then the flip side of not wanting to believe is wanting to know. Do you want to know if it's possible that there is any evidence for gray aliens or anything, reptilians that magically morph into world leaders, all this nonsense that fails the primary test of does common sense allow this to be possible? Because as soon as it fails that, you have to do a lot of work to undo a fail like that. It's not impossible to move beyond an initial fail of that magnitude, but for the most part, 90-some% of the time, if it fails the common sense test, chances are it will never pass any test that allows a grown-up logical mind to accept a thing as valuable in some way. And not next Thursday the 11th, right. We're going to put up a podcast, which is the second and last episode on artificial intelligence. The following, so what would that be? The 18th, I guess. Thursday the 18th of July is when Wayne McCroy is going to come back on, and we're going to take on anti-gravity. We're going to take on flying saucers, the alien thing, the aliens are invading the world thing. Bob Lazar is part of that. Just all of it.
So is it possible that they would try to do some kind of fake alien invasion? I mean, there's got to be, you would think there would have to be a reason why we've just been, this has been hammered, X-Files. There's so much, just everywhere you turn around, though.
Yeah, you tell me. Is there a chance that they might fake a terrorist attack and knock a couple buildings down in the middle of a busy city? Is that a possible thing they might do?
So I guess that kind of answers my question there. But
it's just another false flag event. I mean, that's the way you got to look at it, man.
That's
right.
how the world is run. It is run by lies and fear porn. And when people grow up and quit being afraid, that stuff doesn't work anymore. And that's a fact.
There's also a guy by the name of John Lear. I don't know. You guys are probably familiar with him as well. His family is involved with
and Bob Lazar's good buddy, whose dad was CIA.
Is it possible that these guys believe that that they've obviously been involved in a number of different things? But I mean, is it possible that they actually believe that some of these things are going on?
That's an unprovable fact.
Bob's is a little better than John. John Lear talks about some seriously silly crap, man.
Yeah,
but
and that was
really stupid stuff.
It's not knowable to know certainly what a person believes or doesn't, but it is possible to know if what they're saying holds any water.
Right.
Just by common sense. Mr. Lear has reached out to me before about the lunar wave. And he's still on about damn hidden moon bases and all this other nonsense. It's like, what's that guy's name? I can never remember. Hogue. Mr. Hogue.
Yeah, he wrote the book.
Yeah, in one hand he calls me a CIA shill. In an interview we did in Newsweek, both of us, or the second interview I did in Newsweek. And then he contacts me telling me he figured out what the lunar wave is. I call the dude on the phone, and he basically runs and never gets back to me after he just told me he wants to have me on, because I'm no nonsense. I'm not rude to people, but I'm not going to sit here and drink Kool-Aid when I don't know what's in the damn Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
And that's what they're offering.
I forget what book he...
yeah, it's tampered with.
Which one of the big books that he...
Dark
Face
Vision.
Right, yes.
I read that big-ass book cover to cover. It's just nonsense. It's completely provable nonsense. It's like, I don't know, we live in a frustrating age. Like, I just did probably more research than I've ever done to do the AI series, the one we're about to deliver part 2 of. And in these books, there's all this, what I consider to be acceptable, verifiable information. But in the same breath, they're saying, but China's still pissed off because they lost the space race. So these lies that we've been talking about, which pull the whole world's mind into fantasy, which means any decision based on that fantasy cannot be a correct decision. It's the old computer conundrum. Good information in, good information out. Bad information in, bad information out. That's how the world is run. So all these poor souls wandering the earth who accept that Apollo happened, that accept that NASA's told you every decision they ever make in their life based on these provable untruths is in error. And so here I am doing the research. One of these books, nearly 700 pages, well-researched, but still stuck on the pinnacle lies of our time. And I just keep moving down the road, wondering if I will possibly live in this world long enough to reach a point where some mainstream author is no longer climbing to the pinnacle of foundational lies and echoing them back out into the world, when someone will finally stop and say, well, I did all this research, so I looked at Apollo, and by the way, that's not acceptable. Will we ever reach that point? Yeah. I'm just asking here.
Well, I mean, it's a sickness. I mean, it's a
delusion, I would say.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. There's different levels of it where, we're the way that the system is designed, to succeed, to fail. Failure's not an option. So people, what they will do is they will join, the rest of the cast, because they realize that outside of that, there's no money to be made. There's no way, and they've created this monetary system. They've created all this so that people, if you don't participate, and Clint spoke about this in great detail, he was pretty adamant about, like, you have to leave this system because you can't. The system's never. You're never going to be able to stop the system, and that's where Alex Jones comes in, where you're going to fight the New World Order, and then for years,
I've got the documents.
I don't agree 100% with that reasoning. And while Clint's logic is 100% sound,
right.
You want to be free of all this, then don't participate. The problem with that is nobody's really willing to go live in a teepee and make everything from nature anymore.
Well, since then, and everybody kind of goes through different. Everybody goes through different phases of understanding and, acceptance. So in a few of the conversations that I had with him, he's like, the only way that I'm going to be able to do some of the things and get the information out, he said, I have to be in the matrix.
There it is.
Yeah. And it was just something, I think it was mostly his disgust. And that's the thing that pushed him to say some of the things. I mean, his information seems to be spot on, but just kind of jumped.
There's a logical problem here.
Right.
There's a logical problem here that people overlook. We can say "they" all day long, and quite often we do say it. They did this. They did that. The truth is that each mind that will listen to this podcast is helping shape this reality.
Sure.
So if the majority of those minds are wrapped up in non-truths, like 9/11 was terrorists with box cutters and we landed on the moon, then that's a problem, because those minds are helping create what we currently have. Mm-hmm. When enough minds go beyond the fear porn and the nonsensical things we're all convinced are true, then a different world begins to emerge.
Right.
And that's where I think a lot of the logical work, like what Clint does, it's beyond logically sound. There's proofs galore, and he ties it back to scripture and all kinds of places where you can accept wholeheartedly that is a adult level-headed assessment. Mm-hmm. The problem becomes is that we all have to frickin' live here, man.
Yeah,
so true. What sense does it make to say, I got to live here, but I'm going to find every wrong thing about it and then commiserate? Does that make sense? Is that a logical thing to do? Or is it a more logical thing to say, I got to live here, I'm going to identify the things that are wrong with it, and I'm going to try to work out a way where a lot of people could start to change it? So the whole foundation of what Jason and I do is that. It's that is it in a nutshell. We're going to offer what we consider to be adult, higher-minded logic. It may not be right sometimes, and if we find it's not, we'll go on the air the minute we know and say, sorry, we made a mistake. But we will endeavor to be logically accurate, common sense, adult minds to offer a different point of view than your fear porn, lie-ridden mainstream news in the evening is pushing every day. Right. And the idea behind it is that if tons and tons of people said, wait a minute, that's interesting, I'm going to consider this. As a matter of fact, I'm going to test it, and it's so interesting, and I've tested it, I'm going to adopt it. Now minds are starting to work in a direction where the next decision they make is not based in error. It is very easy for an adult to control a child. And what we're talking about here is no different. It's just a mindset.
Right.
The child is not grown up enough to not be in fantasy, to not have the same power of intellect. But it's no different when you get all these adults in the room and the they we always like to talk about are pulling all the strings. Well, truly, those adults need to grow up a little more, don't they? Because someone is still pulling their strings.
Yeah.
And to be fair, there's probably currently no way to ever be free of the string pulling. I mean, if you're using fiat currency, you're getting your strings pulled. If you pay insurance companies, you're getting your strings pulled. But on a more human level, when you are using common sense and an adult mind to try to deduce what's right, what's true, and know it, then all the decisions you make are more helpful to a natural world. And the flip side is if you do everything in error, then everybody knows the value of error.
Absolutely. And I found that, that exactly what you say that you guys do and that you are doing, and that is why it kind of, drew me in, and I was like, this is great information, and you guys seek it out and you do just that. So it's much appreciated.
It's an option for people to consider, and that's the best you can do in this world. You can't take a sledgehammer and jam your ideas, no matter how precious they are to you, into another mind. The best you can do is figure out a good way to present it, and then the mind that comes in contact with it will make their own choice. Am I interested in this? Does it seem valuable? And then an adult mind will say, well, wait a minute. This does seem valuable, but I'm not going to believe it just because Crow or Jason said it. I'm going to try to rip a hole in it. I'm going to try to prove it wrong. And if you can't, then you're starting to find real value there. And that is what's been missing in Western culture, where our school, what we call learning, from my point of view, it's not learning. To read a book, to memorize some things, then to regurgitate it on a piece of paper to get an A is not learning. What learning is an individual mind coming at an issue with its individual qualities and working logically towards an outcome. And that outcome is not based on what Einstein said, or the president of the United States, or the head of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee. It's what your mind can make of it. That is what's critical. And the problem is, we've all been taught that if Einstein said a thing, it's a law. Well, I got news for you. Nothing Einstein said is a law. It's all theoretical gibberish. And by the way, it's been around long enough that it was ever going to be proved a law, we'd have seen that day by now. We have supercomputers in this world now, by the way.
Right, yeah, the quantum stuff. All right, so very well said there. I spent a number of years, barking up, setting my camp up underneath the InfoWars tree, and
it's a good place to learn, not to be fooled.
Absolutely, yeah, and it took a little while, but well,
he also changed as the years went by. Like, what he did earlier on is definitely not what he's doing now.
Yeah, a lot of people.
You got to bait your hook, don't you?
A lot of people,
big time,
in his organization think that Kurt Nemo bailed, and now he does a blog, Another Day in the Empire, and he kind of like summed it up. He was like, what's going on over there is just not. It's just not adding up over there. Where for him to think, for Jones to think that that Trump's going to get in there and the New World Order is on its heels. I mean, I saw that and was like, this is ridiculous.
In this world with information, go look at places that don't have a large audience, because that's another rule of thumb. People like Jones go to 100 million minds every morning. They're on almost every hour of the day, sure. Coast to coast, international, and every one of those systems is owned by the people we like to call the powers that be. As a matter of fact, there are very few massive multinational corporations that own all information systems. So if you are listening to someone with access to 1 million minds, you are looking at someone playing by the rules, whether they'd like to or whether they would not like to. When you go to places like YouTube and someone's got 1,000 followers, that's where you need to be paying attention. Because that person has a limited audience, will probably always have a limited audience, but nonetheless, they are endeavoring to share with the world what they think is important. Right. And in this day and age, if you go to TV or broadcast radio or any other show of any size for your information, I got news for you. You're not going to receive what you're after, whether you think you got it or not.
Like I've not made a penny doing this. Like everywhere that I've done my broadcast, it was always, on the back end, everybody taking care of it. I don't make any money doing it. it was really just out of sheer concern that I wanted to kind of reach out. So late 2011, I started doing Blog Talk Radio, and then Oracle Broadcasting. And I think because, and I said this to Wayne as well, like, because I've done this thing, just from the heart, from out of concern for the future of humanity, my family, and then, everybody else branching out. I truly believe that my path has brought, people into my, to me, Greg, who said to me, you might want to check on this, the shape of the earth. I don't think we're spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. And then he said, hey, you know what? And he'll just leave me messages and say, hey, I think you might want to tune into this guy over on RBN. He does a show called The Corporation Nation. So I tune in there, and next thing you know, I'm doing some podcasts, and I'm learning from, some pretty, good people, like people that you said, like the people that don't have, people that are putting good information out there, and they're not shilling, or they're not doing any of this. They're just doing things that they feel as a sentient being that they should be doing, and their own particular path. And people like Greg, people like Clint, just kind of allow me to, get involved and to be part of something of a realization, the whole straw man thing.
And are we talking about Greg Carlwood? Is that who you mean?
No. Greg is a guy who worked on Wall Street for a number of years.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So he just kind of, was aware of the element, and we know that the degenerate element that's going on over there, and it's always been the case, behind the Russian Revolution and the Wall Street families and stuff. And so, and of course, me listening to you guys as well, just moving in the right direction, not learning. And I think that's the thing, that we have to learn. We have to, keep an open mind and move through these things that are uncomfortable. Like you guys covered the Connecticut shooting situation, which is very, it's a hot topic because people, and the system understands, like, if somebody's questioning this, they are the worst. So I understand why you guys are moving the direction and the format that you do, where in the second hour you talk about things that you wouldn't talk about in the first hour.
One of the most important things that we can impart to people is offer up an alternative method of how to assess information. And even though we point out that mercury is misused all the time, it's like any tool. A tool can kill someone, or it can make something beautiful. Right. You could carve a statue with a knife, or you could butcher someone. Mm-hmm. So these symbols and these old ideas are no different. The mercury symbol has encapsulated within it, and by the way, the idea of mercury is 100% about mind. It's what it is about from antiquity forward. It teaches you how to use the crossroad idea to assess information. And I have a blog up on Crow 777 Radio. It was posted on June 23, 2017. The title that demonstrates this idea to people, the title of that blog is I Went Down to the Crossroads and Left Walking. Of course, that's a play on the Robert Johnson idea, because he fell down to his knees. I'm pointing out that you don't need to fall down to your damn knees if you understand things. But in that blog, I demonstrate what it means every time you're presented with information. When you're presented with information, your mind has been drugged to the crossroads. And just so people understand, the crossroad is a four-way intersection where two roads cross each other. And every single time your subconscious or conscious is presented with new information, you have been taken against your will to the crossroads. And the reason is, at the crossroads, like when you're driving a car, you have to make a decision. There is no other possible human option. You have to go straight, you have to make a right, you have to make a left, you have to go back the way you came, or if you want to get into the idea of the fifth element, you can sit right where you are until you die, which is not much of an idea. Point here is, if you look at all information in this way, oh, that's a new thing that I just heard. Oh, my mind's just been drugged to the crossroads. Now I have to make a decision. Even if I choose not to choose, I have still made a decision. Right. Point is if you choose poorly, then you are leading your mind further into a fantasy-based reality, which means the decisions based on that error will also be errors.
Do you think most of the times when you're presented with this crossroads scenario, how often in your life or from your experience, is it always the system that brings you to that, or is it can it just be like a grassroots, like organic type of a thing where
you can do it to yourself. I mean,
like
you can
choose whether you're going to use wheat bread or white bread. That's your own stuff. But
that's a prime example. So there you are in the store, and there's 50 kinds of bread. You just got drugged to the crossroad. Now you have to make a decision. Well, if you're interested in healthy things, the decision you make there will be important to you. If you don't give a damn about healthy things, well, then I guess you can make any decision you want, unless maybe you prefer wheat over white. Point is every single decision can be viewed in this way, to include ideas that you come up with on your own. That too brings you to the crossroads. But most of the time, it's the system around us. You turn on the TV, here's the weather, you're being told something. Oh, global warming is going to sink your city. There you are. You've just been drugged to the crossroads. Oh, there was just an earthquake in California, and by the way, there's going to be more really soon. You've just been drugged to the crossroads. Anything, any information. And after you get used to not accepting and believing information just because your ears heard it, you get to an adult level where you automatically do not accept information till you challenge it. So,
all right,
that's what I can offer.
Okay, so again, we got about 2.5 minutes here. So again, tell everybody, both you guys, like where you can be reached, where your information can be.
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, the most important thing first is Vimeo On Demand / Shoot the Moon is where you find the film. It's available for a $7 rental, and you get a whole week unlimited watch. So that's the first thing. I have a YouTube channel, Secrets of Saturn, and I can be reached at secretsofsaturn@gmail.com if you have anything you want to say to me.
Nice.
Okay. Additionally, the main site where Jason posts, it's all broken up into 2 hours. The first hour is free to everyone. The second one is for membership only, because that's what we consider the free speech zone. This does not go on YouTube or Facebook or all these other places that want to censor us. And so basically for the price of a latte, you can join for a month. And the forums there are night and day, different than YouTube. YouTube's kind of a cesspool when you come to a forum like the one I'm running, and you see all the higher-minded people in there being polite to each other and trying to figure things out. The website is crow777radio.com. Crow has 2 R's, CRROW, and then there's my YouTube channel, which is simply Crow777.
Okay. Awesome. I wanted to share with you guys, because I saw a really, really good documentary, and stick with me after I end the